Dragger, an original novel by Robert Napier, narration and images powered by AI. Chapter 3, So-So Stories. Dex made her way back into the deeper chamber. It was not so dark this time. There was a fire burning to one side. There were markings on all the surfaces, some chalk, charcoal, and scratches. She could barely see, but what she could see was fascinating and strange. Great towers and palaces, human faces, forests, all interwoven with lines of text she couldn't read. It did not occur to her to be scared of anything. The man was sitting on the other side of the fire, his head down. She walked right over to him and said, "Hi." He looked up slowly, not startled, but not like someone who knows what to expect either. He seemed to recognize her, at least as much as she recognized him. "You've come back," he said. She figured he'd be happier to see her, and she was hurt by his lack of enthusiasm. "You asked me to, remember? It was your idea." "You're right. I did. I thought you'd be back sooner. I had to eat." She couldn't quite express the urgency. "Have you learned anything about this place?" "Oh yes," she said. "The food falls twice a day, and the piglets are very hungry, and I have a friend." Tyrek put his hands over his face, and his shoulders jerked up and down quickly. "That's a lot," he said after a while. He remembered he was talking to a small child. He was angry with himself. He reflected a while longer, and Dex sat down by the fire. She hadn't realized how much she missed the warmth of a fire until the heat melted on her face. She was tempted to crawl inside it. Tyrek laughed one loud "ha," but stifled himself. "What? Piglets?" he asked. "This is a pig farm," said Dex. "No one told me that," she quickly added. "I figured that out on my own. You're very clever." Dex hadn't talked to anyone in a long time. She immediately began to tell him about eating worms and the apartment, and how the secret to stealing food from a gore is hitting the snout just right. And she told him how she helped the runt get food, and how she could probably get him some food too, if there was any left. Tyrek listened quietly, without interrupting her, except to say, "Uh-huh," and "Really?" After a long pause, when Dex couldn't think of any more to say, Tyrek asked, "What's his name?" Dex didn't understand who he meant. "The runt. What do you call him?" "I don't know his name," she said. Supposing Dragger was the one who knew everybody's name, why don't you give him a name? That didn't seem like a polite thing to do, but she had to admit it was a fun concept. Dex closed her eyes. She thought about it very hard for a long time, so that Tyrek thought she had fallen asleep. Dex smiled and opened her eyes. "I guess his name is Runty." "An excellent name." Dex went on. "Lord Runty Daja, Welzen Danderleishan." Tyrek laughed. "All that? I must meet this piglet. It would seem we are related." Dex didn't see how that was possible, but she was glad they were laughing. "Do you remember my name?" he asked. Dex felt insulted by such a simple question, but panicked when she drew a blank. The first thing she wanted to say was "dead man," but that wasn't right. She knew it was something like Lord Runty Danderleish, but without the Runty part. Finally, she settled on Trek. "Very close. I'm Tyrek." Dex concentrated very hard and said very confidently, "Trek, Tyrek, Trek." Tyrek shook his head. "Yes, perfect. You've got it. How come you have a fire?" she asked abruptly. "Dragger wants me alive, if not exactly healthy." "What do you mean?" "He brings me plenty of food and some provisions." "What's provisions?" "Supplies, things that I might need." "Oh, I don't have any provisions." Trek jumped up and vanished into the dark. Dex was not exactly startled, but didn't know how to respond to this action. Trek jumped back down beside the fire and laid out an assortment of dried meats, bread, roots, and nuts. "Here," he said, "you must take mine. I owe you much more than that." Dex didn't hesitate to grab at the food and shove handfuls in her mouth. It was a reflex that happened without any intention. Trek pushed the food towards her eagerly. After 3 handfuls, she realized what she was doing and stopped herself. Trek urged her, pleaded with her to take as much as she liked. Dex smiled and thanked him very much, but she asked sheepishly, "Is it all right if I take a little for Runty?" "Take it all, please. I can barely stand to eat it, especially now." Dex filled her shirt with as much as she could, but she was in reality a very small girl, and it didn't make much dent in his provisions. Why did Dragger bring you here? What do you mean? Why are you here? He's my father. He told me. Then why am I here, do you think? Dex was about to ask if Dragger was his father too, but she was pretty sure that wasn't the case. I don't know. He has brought us both here for a reason. Dex shrugged. It didn't seem important. Have you remembered where you came from yet? Dex shrugged again. It would seem you have memory loss, probably from some injury, or trauma from trying to escape. Dex was unimpressed by this diagnosis. Do you remember how we met? I mean, before you came down here. No, it was in Nethertyne. I like stories about Nethertyne, Dex said, with little regard to the fact she had never heard a story about Nethertyne and could not recall hearing any story whatsoever. Trek found himself unexpectedly playing storyteller. He was uncomfortable in the role, as he considered himself more a man of deeds than of words. But under the circumstances, all they had was time and each other. He took a few breaths to remember the whys and wherefores of their mutual misadventure. He begins slowly, unsure and faltering, but quickly fell into a campfire trance. The words came more easily than expected. Dawn broke over the ruined village of Nethertyne. A death-black wasteland stretched to the horizon. The hot air of a huge fire rippled over a lone figure, a small, dark-haired child. That's you. She's a tragic lass with blood matting her shaggy hair and spattering her baggy tunic. A light wind whips around her as she scrounges on a large pile of debris, the smoldering remnants of the structure stabbed skyward. She moves with jerky motions. A single golden sparkle in the morning sky catches her eye, and she turns to face approaching wanderers. You waved for us. You were squatting on the pile of debris, even as it smoked and smoldered, and you dug through the rubble. We pitied you. Dex examined her hands in the firelight. 2 of her fingers were crooked, and she was missing a fingernail. Her hands had been raw and sore this whole time, and she thought little of it. She was sure that pain was a part of life. She noticed Trek leaning to look at her hands, and she felt embarrassed by his gaze. She tucked her hands in her lap, changing the subject, and urging him on with the story. Dex asked, You said there were 2 wanderers? Who was with you? Was it my mother? No, I'm afraid not. We never saw her. I was with my companion. Also, a Vinian knight, Sir Rowan Walker. Were you very good friends? Yes, said Trek, annoyed at the interruptions. But noticing Dex was unsatisfied, he went on. We had grown up together. Our families had grown up together for generations, you see. We had been schooled together in the Loshar Library, prayed together in the Greyfane Temple, trained side by side at the Academy of Vin. We had stood at each other's weddings. My wife, Morwan, is Rowan's very own sister. We had been to the funerals of each other's loved ones on Pyre Island, and together had fought countless enemies of the Jozen Empire. Dex glazed over as he rattled off unfamiliar words. Is that sufficient? Dex nodded. Together, we moved towards the mound where you were standing. We were hoping the smoke would hide us from the watchtower, so we might catch our breath. Why were you out of breath? Because we had been running all night. Oh, Dex didn't think to ask any follow-up questions. So there we were, gasping together without speaking. Each of us, I remember, looked sideways at the busy little girl. Rowan called to you. Do you remember that? Nuh-huh. Hey there, he said. What are you about? But I elbowed him to be quiet. We couldn't help but watch and wonder. Overwhelmed with curiosity and moved by your determination, I crept closer and called again. What did the girl do then? Quiet. Do you want to hear this? Good. You did not answer. That's when I saw that your hands were bleeding, and likely some of your fingers were broken or dislocated. She was too busy for you. Yes, I guess she was. Well, it had been a long night. I was tired, hungry, frustrated, beaten, and trapped. So I snatched her up by the arm, mad that she was hurting herself in all this nonsense. Mama! You said. I can hear Mama. You yanked back your arm and kept digging. I watched, stunned, then grabbed you again. Stop it, I commanded. Do you remember what you did next? No, said Dex, wide-eyed and leaning forward. You kicked? You really don't remember this? You kicked me in the shin. Well, I remember that. I let you go. Rowan interrupted. We must go. Leave her. But I shook my head. looking into the burnt pile of rubble. No way could anyone still be alive. I turned away. Trek twisted his torso from Dex and paused dramatically. Dex leaned closer until she almost fell forward. Then he whipped around and said, "But I turned back. But there were archers. From before, I could just make them out on the ridge." "Oh no, what did the archers want?" "They wanted to shoot us with their arrows. So, without thinking, I grabbed you and we ran for cover, just as arrows hiss and bite all around us." Trek jabbed his finger at Dex, pretending to be falling arrows. We almost made it out of range, but Rowan was hit in the arm. He stumbled, but kept going. I carried the small girl under my arm like a lump melon. I reached for Rowan, but I was struck in the leg. "Did it hurt?" "Of course it hurt," said Trek. He stretched out his leg to show her the ruddy yellow bandages on his calf. We fled to the edge of the Ivanhoe River, the boundary between Joda and Jozen. Dex furrowed her brow as if he were speaking a foreign language. "I'll tell you all about it sometime. The important thing is, we can see the fortress of the Deltaic Legion on the bluff. Downstream, we can see the crush have started to destroy the bridge to prevent our escape. Some wooden bits of the bridge floated against the shore." I handed the strange little girl to Rowan. "What am I supposed to do with this?" he asks me. I said, "I've seen enough death today." "And what was the little girl doing?" "I want my mama. I want my mama." That's all you'd say. "Where was she?" asked Dex, curious, but not overly concerned. "Your mother is dead," I said to you. Dex received the information with all the empathy of anyone hearing about some stranger's far-removed misfortune. Of course, she was sad for the little girl who lost her mama, but what did that have to do with Dex? I said, "I am Commander Dweller, and this is Lieutenant Walker. You can come with us, or you can wait for the Crushan soldiers." Trek paused there to add, "Just so you know, they're the ones who burned your house and village down." "Why did they do that?" "It doesn't matter, because that's what Crushans do." So, Rowan asked, "What now? Swim for it?" "I can't swim," I answered. Trek again indicated his bandages to Dex, who winced to look at it. "Well, neither can I," Rowan said, "but I won't let that stop me." And he showed me the arrow protruding from his forearm. "My arm is shot. Then float, damn it. Just go. Muster the Legion." He was reluctant to abandon me, but obeyed my direct order. Rowan used the floating wreckage of the bridge to cross the river and reach the other bank. The Crushan soldiers downstream shifted direction and marched towards you and me. "What are you doing?" you cried. "Mama, no!" I tried to run, but my legs stiffened. Soon, it was dead weight, dragging behind me as I hopped, and you're never any help, kicking and wiggling. Before I collapsed, I saw a troop of Crushans coming. What happened after that? This happened. You're living at Lump Melon. Dex thought about it for a long time, then blurted out, but there was no more time to talk though. The iron bars on the doors were heard groaning in the dark. Someone was coming. Trek jumped up and grabbed Dex by the arm. "Get out of here. Don't let them see you. Don't ever let them know you've been here. Go." Dex was more scared of Trek's voice than of whatever was coming through the door. She scuttled back to the wall and slithered into the darkness. She sat between the walls and waited. She was confident she was invisible there. It was dark, and the hole, really, was no bigger than a lump melon. General Dragger appeared in the firelight. He cast a long, deep shadow behind him. Lurking in that shadow were two war ghouls, like reflections of himself, swirling in darkness. Dragger carried his massive warhammer across his shoulders. Casually, the weight was like nothing to his powerful arms. His intricate robes weaved black leather straps and quilted cloth with silver plates of armor on his shoulders, chest, and legs. He regarded the squalid commander with boredom tinged with malice. Tyrek remained seated by the fire, picking through the nuts and berries he'd been provided. "What do you want, North Raider? I'm rather busy at the moment. I wanted to make sure you had received my care packages. I had to leave hastily and was gone longer than expected." Dragger gestured behind him, and several war ghouls came in, carrying armloads of furnishings, dishware, carpets, and tapestries. They sorted and arranged it all, without a word. "What are we doing here? You and me? Do you expect me to grovel? To beg? No, No, I know you better than that. It's just, I like having you around. You're quite the trophy. Jozen nobility, Vinian knight, mass murderer. Cut the shit. No, really, insisted Drager. I know you, and you know me. You're perhaps the only man left alive, besides our Lord Damien, who really knows me, or knows what I was, where I came from. It's strange. Drager circled the fire, stretching his war hammer overhead. You're the only man who understands what I've been through, so you're the only one who can appreciate what I've achieved. Achieved? Laughed Tyrek, choking on a hackberry. This? A pit? And a pig farm? You don't like it? You should have seen it before. I found this old ruin half sunk in the mud. It was a great fortress once, when the Lorex drove the Sawjaws into the swamps. I have rebuilt it into something better. I have turned these ruins into a training ground. From here, I will raise a force unlike any the world has seen. And from these humble beginnings, I will purge the Vinian knights from all the world. In case you didn't know, Damien Poth is dead. No one has seen him in 15 years. Dweller stifled a sardonic laugh. He died in Endria, with all the real Carvinians. Drager was unmoved by this false slight, and remarked, My children tell me the Endrian civil war is far from over, and it's only a matter of time before the Jozen are forced to turn their attention northward, away from the Don Valley. Tyrek Dweller coughed and grimaced. You're talking about those forest clans, trying to scare people? Pooh, pretending to be fen wolves. Spirian, one of the war ghouls, lurched out of the shadows. He came into Dex's view as he menaced the prisoner with his fists. The spire is a myth. Jozen fables. No, this is something very real. A war on two fronts. A war that Jozen can't win. Drager stepped forward, and the war ghoul fell silent. He crossed his arms impatiently before addressing his captive. While your emperor is distracted by forest folk and bedtime tales, this entire valley will belong to the Crush. It will belong to me. Great. Sounds like you've got it all figured out. I think you're making a terrible mistake, but you never did listen to your elders or your betters. You may go now. 4 or 5 war ghouls, Dex couldn't tell for sure, entered the room. As you can see, old friend, the Carvinian virtues are alive and well, older and better than the heretics of Vin. One of the war ghouls spoke directly to Drager. What shall we do with him, father? He's our guest. Leave him here until he's ready to serve his purpose. Drager turned to leave. His minions turned in unison with him. It's dangerous to keep him here, said the second war ghoul. If word of this reaches Grithora or Kahijo, it could be considered a breach with the council. Drager spoke so that Tyrek could hear him plainly. Commander Dweller has been spreading sedition and mayhem throughout the Don Valley. Now he is my prisoner and will serve as a warning and as our witness. When Drager left the chamber, Dex could see Trek didn't want to tell any more stories, and he would probably be mad at her for staying. Reluctantly, with so many strange words and ideas tumbling in her head, she returned to her apartment. All was quiet in the shotery. She had missed the last feeding. It was all right, though, as she had brought back enough food for herself and something extra for Runty. She fed him through the fence and pet him on his snoot. From then on, he slept outside her apartment. The next morning, after a salty breakfast of burnt meat, fat, and melon rinds from the vents, Runty waited outside the fence, while Dex went down to visit her friend. That was 2 friends she had now. She often recounted them, and imagined what it would be like to have more, but perhaps that was being greedy. She didn't want to be like the biggest gore pups, Pusher and Shover, that she had also named, now that she knew how it was done, who bullied the others for no good reason. Back so soon, said Trek, when he heard her in the dark. He kept a perpetual fire burning on the stone floor, but it didn't do much to illumine the chamber. Not that there was anything to see. That's good. I hoped you would be. Trek had already prepared a small pile of provisions for her, and what hard bits, foul and stinky they couldn't eat, Runty would surely relish. I want to hear more of the story, please. What story? The one about the little girl and the wanderers. Oh, that story. I'm afraid there isn't much more to tell. I was thinking, what of? You said you owed me? Did I? What does that mean? To owe someone? Well, it means they did something for you, and you must do something for them. Like what? Like anything. If I say to you, here is some money, then you must give the money back. I see, said Dex. She was hopelessly confused. But what did I give you? It's not like that, said Trek. Not like that at all. What's it like? You didn't give me anything. It's what I took from you. What? Trek paced in the dark. Dex couldn't see him, but she waited patiently for him to come back. When Dex began to stir the small logs near the fire with her foot, Trek dropped down across from her. Your village, your mother. It's my fault. I thought you said the Crushens. That's true, but how can you understand? Is it a story? The Crushens were already there, but when we arrived, Rowan and myself, that's when the fighting started. Why were the Crushens there? To occupy the village. Oh, Dex nodded. But by now, Trek could tell when he had lost her. The Crushen soldiers. They wanted food and shelter like this. He waved at the fire and the provisions. In Nethertyne? Yes. Good, said Dex with a bounce. She liked stories about Nethertyne. Why were you there? Asked Dex, but could hardly wait for an answer, as possibilities leapt into her mind. Were you visiting your friends? Were we friends? No. I had never been there before. We were chasing assassins, murderers, across the river. Who did they murder? Dex was unsure what that entailed. Several people. Josen citizens. What's Josen? You said that before. I am Josen. We are a people, an empire. Am I a Josen? No. You're a Don. Where are they from? Nethertyne? No. Yes. No. Not really. That's not how it works. Nethertyne is a Don village. There are many villages here. This whole valley is Don. We are in Jodah. Trek scratched his head for how to explain. Rowan had been the teacher. He had only been the commander. Look, he said. It's like you and me. We're here. Then this place is somewhere. And that place is somewhere, and so on. See? Dex didn't mind admitting that made no sense. So, a person lives in a house. The house is in a village. The village is in a region. The region is in a kingdom. A kingdom is in an empire. Different sizes. Like you and me. Dex referenced how much bigger he was than her. I'm a village. You're an empire. No, not like that. Dex was pretty sure she was right, so she crossed her arms and looked aside. Person, village, region, kingdom, empire. Dex, Nethertyne, Jodah, Josen. I'm not stupid, said Dex, rolling her eyes as hard as she possibly could. Though she was legitimately concerned, she was stupid, because only stupid girls can't remember their mothers. She started to cry. Trek felt like an ass, and he scooted over to pat her on the shoulder. It had been 2 years since he had seen his own children, and he had never been good at this sort of thing besides. Dex sniffled and wiped her nose on her arm. Then she had a revelation. Jodah is a part of Josen, so I am Josen too. Trek was surprised by this reversal of feeling and tried to remember what he had said to give her that idea. No, he said quickly. That was just an example. Jodah isn't a part of Josen, nor is it Crushen. It's a sort of middle ground. Not here or there. So, we're nowhere. Well, I can't argue with that. And I'm nobody? No. Of course you're not. I better go, said Dex. Runty will miss me. Trek was sorry to see her go, especially since he had failed so miserably to explain anything to her. He eagerly pressed the provisions into her tiny hands. She took it with a grateful smile, but went away feeling a little sad. Come back soon. I will tell you another story. All right, said Dex over her shoulder. His stories were so-so.
Thank you for listening. Please like and subscribe.